What if the way we chase success is actually stopping us from achieving it? Today on the show, my guest is Jesse P Gilmore. He's the founder of Niche in Control, and he's a coach who helps entrepreneurs and leaders, particularly those in the agency world, escape burnout, scale sustainably, and rebuild their lives from the inside out. Jesse challenges the belief that working harder is actually the path to growth. Instead, he shows how systems, mindsets, processes, and clarity can transform both the person and the business. We'll be discussing how founders can break out of the hustle culture, redefine success, and build companies that support their life, not consume it. This is Shifting Views with Willis. Okay, Jesse, welcome to the Shifting Views podcast. Pleasure to have you here. Thank you for dialing in from across the pond.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Wayne.
No, it's a real pleasure. And I've been really interested in all the stuff that you're doing. I've been looking at all your kind of back work that you've been doing and looking at researching some of the case studies you've been working on. You've kindly sent me some of that stuff in advance. And it's pretty amazing, really. And I think it's right on point in the times that we're in. We are very much in that world of, I guess, what you would call hustle culture, making that quick buck, being great online, getting the metrics and all of that good stuff. But I suppose from your side, that doesn't necessarily equal success, and actually is more likely to lead to burnout and not being successful. Is that a fair assumption? Is that a fair way of looking at it?
Yeah, and I had actually, so Niche in Control is my fourth business. My first three of them were actually based around that idea that if I just worked really hard and did it for a super long time, I'd be successful. And through my own experience, dissolving companies as they were becoming successful because I was losing the freedom that I actually got into entrepreneurship for, and I was losing it. I started realizing that the vision I had in the beginning was kind of just being taken away. And it wasn't until I went into corporate America, learned systems, learned actually taking care of yourself as a founder and being able to have boundaries is actually really beneficial for all parties. Your prioritization of what you work on is highly leveraged. Your ability to show up as a father or a husband and, those kinds of things end up becoming part of the journey towards success. So I think it really depends on what people's definition of success really is.
Yeah, sure. And I was looking at some of the previous things that you've spoken about, and this idea of sort of working 80 hours a week, sending 10,000 emails a day, and like that whole mindset. I suppose in your eyes, that's kind of broken. But many founders, particularly leaders, and you work a lot with agencies in particular, many leaders fall into that trap still. Why do you think that mindset is still in place?
I think there might be different answers depending on which group of people we're talking about. So if we talk about founders is one thing, and if we talk about agency owners, it's another thing. And I think that founders in general, and actually both groups from a high level, the hustle culture is really the loudest in the market. So if you think about, you go onto Instagram, and I actually, right before writing my book, I remember seeing like this ad, and it said there was like a checklist, and there's three things. One of them was get married, have kids, and then build an empire, and then only build an empire was checked. And I was like, screw that. Like, this just looks so ridiculous. But I think that the loudest people in the market right now typically are not married, or they don't have a good marriage. There's some exceptions to that. Same thing with kids. A lot of times they just look at, maybe somebody that's working 80 hours and being like, that's just how you become successful. I think they're just the people that we kind of glorify in our culture as being the people that are most successful by sacrificing everything. I found, for my own self and starting to work with marketing agencies, and over the last 6 years, I've worked with over 500 of them. I started realizing that the marketing agency owners, because they're in marketing, they typically have an external type of focus as well, because they're helping their clients, get ranked on SEO or run ads or whatever. And a lot of times they feel as though whatever they need to do is just kind of like be that external focused type of success. And when I dig deep into it, a lot of the people that I work with don't necessarily care about making $10 million and being an influencer or whatever, but they're kind of feeling as though maybe they have to do that in order for them to be successful. So I think it has a lot more to do with the marketing messages that are out there and them just being the loudest as opposed to like what actually people need or feel if you dig deep.
Yeah. Do you think there's an element of sort of needing to have the foundation of almost security and success and having built the empire, so to speak, in order to then have a quality family, personal life? So that idea of, okay, I've got the foundation, I've got the money, I've got the success, I've got all of that good stuff. Now I can look at love. Now I can look at building a family and we can have this wonderful, enjoyable time because I've built all of this thing. As the mindset almost reversed the other way around, you need one to feed the other.
Yeah, yeah. You're describing what's called a have, be, do model, which is like what everybody pushes. Like once I have this, then I'll be this, and then I can do the things that I want to. And I think that's flawed. I think it's a be, do, have model. When you become the person that does the things and makes the decisions that are needed in order for you to have the things that you want eventually. And I think that what's most important is actually understanding just human psychology works when we get into mental feedback loops. So mental feedback loops kind of like can either build you up or break you down. And it comes based around what your thoughts and actions are working together. So if you have a thought of, I got to reach out to this prospect, and you take that action, it's kind of like it starts building you up positively, like you're a person that has self-integrity. If you have the thoughts of doing certain things but then don't do it, that kind of breaks you down. The reason why I'm talking about the mental feedback loops is because if you sacrifice your marriage, your kids, in order for the business to succeed, and the image and the identity that you've built around as a person that says no to going to your daughter's gymnastics practice because you have to do prospecting, then the time where you can finally have it freed up, she might not want you to go to the practice. You might not have those kind of opportunities. I'm talking about that because I went to my daughter's practice yesterday. So, right. Yeah. And I think that everybody has it backwards. And if you think about and how I kind of dug deep into the mindset and like the future self and stuff like that, as I started to look at how do I want to be remembered? And what is legacy? What does that mean to me? Like, what is the definition of success for me? And I started to understand, just doing my own inner work, that we kind of that my definition of success is a little bit different than maybe Alex Hormozy or like the $100 million people, And I think it's because I view success as I don't have to sacrifice relationships with my kids or my wife in order for the business to succeed. I think all three of those, including myself and my body, can rise at the same time. And I think that's a much better fight to fight in life. Like you're always going to have battles that you have to go through as like, whether you're a founder or an employee, you're always dealing with something. And if you just pick your battles with an intention, you start to create a life by design, which is a lot better. But kind of going on a rant here, but
that makes sense because I think this whole idea, I was speaking to someone the other day about this, it's funnily enough, and we was talking about, what is the definition of success? And he was sort of saying it's often success by somebody else's standards rather than what is successful for you. And you referenced sort of how Alex there, or there's a million influencers that are out there that are all, and the younger generation in particular really glued to that because they're like, hey, I want that thing. And it could be money, it could be success, it could be having a great body, it could be wanting to be a supermodel, whatever it is you want to be. And so you look at the thing to say, that thing over there, I want that. But then almost sacrifice what is actually your own happiness, your own success, and those little wins, those things that make you happy every day. That we only have one lifespan, and if we're lucky, we make it to 80 years if we're fortunate, and in that 80 years, like what is the happy joy of that? And if you're spending, 50 of those years chasing somebody else's vision of success, then essentially you're just throwing away life. Surely that's the mindset we need to be in.
Yeah, I think a lot of people kind of avoid those deeper questions. Those questions of, who are you today? And what are you currently doing from your habits or your mindset or the way that you're viewing things, shifting views, right? Yeah. Where are you right now? What's your current self? And I'm actually doing like a whole month of a LinkedIn content based around identity shifts that are needed within 2026. So it's very, very timely. But if you dive deep into where you are today, there are certain things that are working for you that you're getting momentum, and certain things that are holding you back. And when you define that current self, who you are today is really based around, it's like the answer of who am I, or who are you? And it's based around past choices. So if you look at your bank account, it's not because of what you did today, it's based around what you did in the past, right? And if you think about your future self, the version that's the 80-year-old, or like when you pass on, looking at how do you want to be remembered, when you have your funeral, what are people saying, like that kind of stuff. And if you start defining your future self, you're going to start to understand there's a gap between where you are and where you want to go. And if we just stayed there, it would suck, because then you'd feel like this never-ending gap of like pain. But if you start to understand that there is a third self, which is your becoming self, it's the part of you that's deciding to let go of past patterns, past habits, past mindsets that were holding you back, and you're starting to embrace a new version of you that's emerging. That's ultimately where you start to get empowered by this type of work. But so many people don't like to do that type of work because it's very revealing, and it's kind of like a mirror,
Yeah.
And I would suggest that if anybody is listening to me and Wayne, and you're kind of like, maybe even just hearing about this, you're like, oh, there's these certain things that are kind of holding me back. But, then I would do that type of deep work. And if you don't really know, like a good mirror activity is just a time log. Log your time for 7 days straight every half an hour, and be as open and honest about it. And from there, you start becoming you're looking at facts of how you're using your time, and how we use our time determines whether we're heading towards our future self, or our person we aspire to be, or we're going away from it. So that's probably a lot to unpack, but.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, so just looking back, because obviously Niche and Control is, you said at the start, is your fourth business, if I remember rightly.
Yes.
But obviously this is something you've built up to over kind of years of building your businesses. Was there like a turning point or specific moment for you, or something that said, listen, working harder and working more strenuously is not the way. This is not the way I need to be. What was the switch? Do you remember that?
The first time I was aware of it was towards the end of my first business. So I've been an entrepreneur since 2006, and at the time of recording, it's 2026. So, and my first business was based around an idea, and that we kind of fell in love with, which is literally the worst business to start. Is like just based around an idea. And towards the end of it, I was working 60, 80-hour weeks. It took us almost 3 years to get a proof of concept out, which is not what I would recommend either. There's a lot of like things that kind of led towards the moment where I remember getting to a place where I was losing the vision of the business. And that's the worst thing that a founder can ever go through, is like you build something and then all of a sudden like it's something, but then it's not really like you don't know how to lead it. You're losing the passion for it. And once you lose the passion, the business is going to dissolve. And I remember a very specific time where I was just like, I just can't do this anymore. Like physically and mentally, I'm just like done. And it was at a time where we were externally very successful, but on the inside I was dying. And that was the first kind of like awareness that something was wrong. When I dissolved that one and started another one, I didn't really know that it was actually how I was setting up the businesses. I didn't know about systems and processes and training and so forth. And what I started realizing was each one of the second and the third business was basically all based around my skills. So if I didn't work didn't get done. And as we become more successful, just increase the hours. And I was like, something's wrong. And it wasn't until I sucked up my ego and went into corporate America, working under a $4 billion global corporation with a sole mission in corporate America to remove what's called single points of failure. I know all these terms are kind of a thing, but single points of failure is literally the thing that I was in my previous businesses, where if a business is reliant upon or dependent upon a single individual. And if that person is gone, then the client gets impacted. Removing that through systems, processes, and training was what I learned in corporate America, led towards an acquisition. And then towards the end of my time in corporate, I was like, holy crap, that was my light bulb moment. So, and there was one moment at the end of dissolving the first business, and the second one was based around at the end of corporate going, oh my gosh, if I just would have known this information ahead of time, I would have saved myself like years of trial and error. And so niche and control was based around taking everything I learned from entrepreneurship that I wish I would have known and corporate America and combining it into one. And that's what we do with agencies.
Yeah, cool. I mean, so I really like this, the process of kind of what you're going through. And I looked at some of the stuff and some of the sort of the methodologies and things that you've talked about in your publications. And I really liked this idea of shifting from doer to leader. That was an interesting one for me. So kind of going from I've got here doer to trainer to manager, then visionary. You know, what does that, I mean, what physically does that transition look like? You know, how do you make that shift from, as you say, from your very first, but you know, where you are the doer and it's completely reliant on you to actually becoming the visionary and enabling, you know, and leading the way? How does that transition work?
Yeah, totally. So that is our leverage for growth method that I wrote the book on. But I'll break it down. It's 5 main steps. And just as kind of a overview before I get into the steps, the overview of what you're talking about is as a founder continues to do work and become more in demand, they go from the person doing the work to having to shift their identity and how they produce value to the company from the doer to a trainer. So they have to, there's certain skill sets that are needed for that. There's mindset shifts, everything. And then once you become a trainer, eventually get to a place where you're developing people, then now you have to manage performance. So, and management skills and mindsets are different than training mindsets, right? And very different than doer mindsets, right? And once you start managing, eventually you get to a place where you have to lead it in a certain direction, okay? So as long as you understand that from like a high level, this is actually the leverage for growth method broken down into 5 main steps. The first one is based around regaining control of time. If you think about the doer is constantly working in the business. They're the one who does everything, runs the campaigns and does the client onboarding and does everything, right? And you have to start freeing up your time to not be always in the business. You have to be able to start looking at the business and working with the business and doing the things that only you can do as a founder. E-Myth talks about working in versus working on the business. And one of the biggest milestones in the way beginning is to carve out 8 to 10 hours per week for you to work on the business. That time log that I was talking about a second ago is a perfect first step in starting to free up the time. Okay.
Yeah.
Once you have the time and you start to carve out the time, let's just say you don't have 8 to 10 hours, you only have 2. Okay. What do you do with those 2 hours? You move into step number 2, which is building systems. This is where you get everything out of your head and your team's head into systems and procedures. The most important thing is that you have documentation. Everybody rushes to SOPs, but I'm a big process flow guy, so we could go for a long time than that. But you just need to get everything out of your head and your team set into systems and procedures. And the goal with systems is that a person can switch who's doing the work and the customer is not impacted. I call it the delegation system. And this allows you to start to delegate work, maybe even if it's just like the low risk or low value type of stuff, so you can focus on more strategic stuff. What should happen from those 2 hours of working on systems and then you starting to use those systems in your normal time is that those 2 hours become 4, which becomes 6, which become 8, right? And as long as you can continue to use it on systems, you're building scalability into the business. Your kind of like milestone with scalability is that you should be able to take on new clients and be able to hire people where you're not continually increasing the amount of hours that you're working. It takes some time, but that's like the first kind of like main step with systems. The third step within it is once you're close to the systems, you're going to naturally start to understand what is valuable to the client and what is not valuable, and what are our core competences that we can kind of lean on, our strengths as a business, and maybe what are we doing right now that's not our strength or taking up a lot of time or not profitable, right? And so those kinds of insights that you get from step number 2 lead you towards step number 3, where you create a minimum viable solution. So least amount of effort on your end, greatest results for the client, and you price it according to value.
Yeah.
Okay. And there's like, I could go really deep into pricing and a bunch of other things, but the main goal is that you're aligning what you're doing to the value to the client, not what you think is valuable, what they think is valuable. So once you understand the offer and it's valuable, then you start to go to the market. So step number 4 is filling up your pipeline by building all 3 legs of a client attraction system. So client attraction is basically referrals, inbound and outbound. So inbound, you're kind of warming them up like a website or a VSL or different tactics like that. And then outbound, you're reaching out to people that don't know you yet.
Yeah.
And when you combined all 3 of those, and Wayne, if you ever want to dive deeper into these, let me know with different questions, but I'll kind of go over it pretty quickly. If you combined all 3 of those or integrate them, where maybe case studies that you get from clients become an outbound channel, which becomes part of your VSL, combining or integrating those channels allow you to fill up a pipeline pretty quickly. And then the 5th step is empowering the people. It's all your people system. So hiring, training, and managing a growing team. And the main focus is that you kind of shift and have people run whole parts of the company so you can focus on growth.
Yeah.
So that's the leverage for growth method.
Yeah, no, I mean, but it sounds like to me, and you've explained that in detail and really well, and I realize you're just giving me almost a bird's eye view of what is you could go forever on. So I appreciate that. But what's interesting to me in that sort of front is that ultimately that all comes down to the leader, if you like, being able to have that mindset shift in the first place. So recognizing that, that there's a problem in that, I'm doing lots of stuff, but I'm not really achieving a lot, and I'm sacrificing a lot to do this stuff. So there's got to be that switch, hasn't there? There's got to be that personal mindset shift. And would you say that's the hardest point? It's almost like, the admission of this isn't right. I have to make a change somewhere.
Yes, the mindset shift is the biggest thing. If you think about where we are today, so at the time of this recording, it's the beginning of 2026. AI is out there. Everybody's using ChatGPT and all the other things, and so information is not the thing. If you really wanted to figure out the information side, you could just take what we're talking about right now, plug it into the GPT, and get something, right?
Yeah.
It has way more to do with getting to understand things like that don't come from information alone, like certainty, confidence, validation. Those kinds of things come from actual action, right? And I think that people are just they're starting to understand, or at least the ones that I listen to the podcast and stuff are starting to understand that in order for you to achieve what you want, you actually have to become somebody different. There is an identity shift that needs to happen, and that mindset shift is ultimately the main thing. And sometimes it's intentional, but a lot of times people have to go through some experience, maybe like a life change where they don't really have the ability of going back to the 60 or 80-hour weeks. Maybe they have a kid, or they get married, or something happens. But those mindset shifts are really the key.
Yeah. And so you work a lot now. You said you work a lot now with agencies, and so marketing agencies, advertising agencies, and so on. Creative agencies, I assume, is on the main. Is that particular sector one that you recognized this problem, if you like, in amongst all of the other sectors? I mean, I'm sure this happens with lots of founders, lots of entrepreneurs, and lots of leaders, but particularly in the agency world, is it has it got that history of almost that kind of very much hustle culture, fight to be the winner, fight to be the top agency, all of that good stuff, and you recognize that particularly that sector is where it really needs to shift?
Yeah, and I found I actually stumbled upon agencies. I didn't even know what a marketing agency was. I was in a mastermind and at the beginning of Niche and Control, and I started realizing that the marketing agency owners, typically how they start an agency is based around being a freelancer in the beginning. So they're trading their time for hours and money, and they're also really close to the marketing messages. So they're being exposed to that hustle culture a lot. So I think that there's like a couple different environmental factors that are happening, but the way that they are progressing in their business, they do get to a certain point where they're basically re-experiencing the same exact things that happened in my first 3 businesses. And I also think that we kind of, one of my clients, Larissa, had talked about, she's very right-brained and then I was very left-brained. And so it's kind of like this yin and the yang kind of thing where I'm like, oh, you can put a system to that. And she's like, what are you talking about? Yeah. And so I think that marketing agencies typically like, and there's even messages outside of, like Alex Hormozy, but like actually inside of creative agency groups that are like, you must reinvent the wheel with every client in order for you to be creative. And that and sometimes people just accept these things without actually like discerning it or like sifting through the information. And so I think there's a lot of different factors that lead towards marketing agencies having this very specific problem. But you are right. This is more like a founder type of problem. But how you solve it might be the same for agencies, and it might be slightly tweaked for maybe like higher volume, lower cost types of businesses or product businesses versus service. But the overall framework is still there.
Yeah. Do you think there's an element of founders generally trying to scale too quickly, trying to grow too quickly, or trying to make something before it's the right time? And it's almost they're adding the pressure to themselves unnecessarily, so to speak.
What an interesting question, Wayne. Yes. Yeah, I think very similar to what we were talking about in the beginning of the podcast with hustle culture and accepting it. I think the acceptance of the marketing messages leads towards people thinking as though they're always behind. There's always a gap and they're not able to make it. And I think that people, when they're in a rush, miss out on the crucial details or even like the intentions or the becoming version of themselves. And it's kind of interesting. I know that apparently we're talking a lot more about mindset because I'm thinking that there's like naturally in a mindset, there is like a thermostat. Okay. Like what do you consider to be quote unquote normal? Okay. And your the way that the habits and your mindset works is it regulates. Okay. Very similar to if you had a thermostat and it's 70 degrees, but your normal is 68, then the cool is going to start going down, right? The same exact thing happens with your identity and what you consider to be normal. So if you are rushing, and let's just say you make $1 million and you like all of a sudden you're like, whoa, this is awesome. There's something that's going to just regulate it. And people will self-sabotage. They'll do a bunch of random things that just like suck. and it's because of the mindset where they're rushing it. So I absolutely agree with you. I think people rush it and then they put it hard. They make it harder on themselves as opposed to focusing on what's right in front of them that they need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're all probably guilty of it at some point in our history. Anyone who's run a business or has been an entrepreneur or whatever you want to call it, there's always that ambition to be, look, am I getting there quick enough? Have I got what I want? Do I even really know what I want? And again, going back to the conversation at the start, is it what is shown to me? And that's what I think I want, but it's not me actually saying that. It's them telling me that that's what it's supposed to be. And that's a whole, a deeper conversation of psychology, I suppose, really on what all of it is. But, going back to the kind of the structure and the way that the systems and these things work, I'm quite interested in this idea. I get the sense from you that you're very much about a process and having like a system in place and understanding that system and what it's doing and where it's adding the value. And maybe do we need to be a bit more system thinkers rather than kind of, what's the word, like creative lifestyle thinkers almost? We need, if we really want the lifestyle of whatever that is for us, we need to have a system to make that happen. It needs structure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you think about systems, because now AI is such a big thing, I just want to clarify what systems are versus AI, because I think a lot of times people get those mixed up, or if I say system, they're thinking, oh, just ChatGPT.
Yeah,
Totally
yeah,
different things.
sure.
When I think about process and when I think about a founder, Wayne, if you were a marketing agency owner and I'm starting to work with you, one of the first things I would do is I'd just say, what are all the services that you offer and what roles do you play in the business? You list them all out, right? And then from there, I'd say, okay, how do you actually accomplish each one of these? Like setting up a campaign, and you'd start listing out all these different things.
Yeah,
And from kind of like a list of different processes within the business, 80% of what you do for a client, regardless of how quote unquote creative you are, 80% is always going to be the same for every client. The
yeah,
system itself it starts off with processes where you get everything out of your head and you organize it into a sequence of events that you're already doing. Okay, if you're a 6-figure or 7-figure agency or founder, you already have processes that are effective. They might not be documented, but
sure.
being able to capture those is the first kind of step. A
Mm,
system is where you start looking at that process and you go, where does automation or like streamlining or like making it to where these things can go a little bit quicker? Again, automation, not AI.
sure.
And you start to build out a system that makes things predictable. When
Mm,
you build the predictability in a business, the founder can just relax because they don't have to focus on so many different pieces that were all in their head before. And naturally, what happens is that their vision starts increasing.
yeah.
So when I think about systems, I'm not thinking about automating everything. AI is just used after a system is built because it has a predictable input, then it can have a predictable output. And that's where it kind of
Mm,
sits up. Now,
yeah.
back to your question, because I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page with it. Systems thinking is what is necessary for a founder that wants to own a business. Okay, an established business requires the business owner, the CEO, or the person that oversees the business to be leveraging people and systems. Okay,
Mm,
that is very different than a self-employed quadrant. I think this is like Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow quadrants, right? The self-employed person is more based around them. It's a centralized business model, and it's all based around them.
mm,
And I think that there's a distinct difference and a distinct choice that needs to be made in every founder's lives, whether or not they're a self-employed person where it's all about them,
yeah.
or an established business and it's more based around the business. If you
Mm,
make that choice towards a business, you definitely have to be a systems thinker. If you are on the self-employed side, you can be as creative as you absolutely want. you know,
yeah. Yeah.
I think it comes down to the
That's
choice.
such a. I really like that distinction you've made there because it's interesting that these terms do get thrown around. So self-employed, entrepreneur, founder, CEO, but whatever, and they
Mm-hmm.
don't all mean the same thing. Actually, they're all quite different in sort of what it is you're saying. But these things kind of get mixed up into
Mm-hmm.
different things.
Mm-hmm.
But I really like that concept of sort of saying, it's in the title, is it? Sort of self-employed. You're an employee, but you're working for yourself, basically. So you're
Yes.
a doer. You're making things or doing things and getting paid for it, and
Mm-hmm.
but you're paying
Mm-hmm.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
But this idea of kind of being like a founder or an entrepreneur or something along those worlds, really, actually, you're a facilitator. You kind of have a vision, and then you're, as to your words, you're leveraging either people, skills, systems,
Mm-hmm.
processes, whatever it is, and you're bringing those pieces together to make that vision move forward.
Yes.
But the way that you kind of explained it there is really makes sense as well, because it's kind of emptying your own head. If you are going to be the visionary, the creator, if you like, and make
Mm-hmm.
things happen, you can't possibly, you can't realistically do that if you're thinking about the action of doing the thing, because
Yes.
it's juggling too many balls in the air, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I guess what you're saying is that by having a structure, by having a system, by leveraging it and understand it, and then elements of automation, and of course now we've got AI, so we can feed that in, and that's another ingredient, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
By using this stuff, you've got much more chance of scalability, much more chance of leveraging opportunities, and even spotting the opportunities in the first place. And is
Mm-hmm.
that kind of how you're feeding it to founders, clients of yours?
Yeah, absolutely. And And I think getting people to focus on the right things is increasingly important. I think every founder, whether you're an agency owner or not, is bombarded with a lot of information, a lot of things that are pulling on your attention.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I did literally yesterday was give an annual presentation to my team, and I have a very lean team, really focused around the switch. If you don't mind, can I talk a little bit about my own journey going through Leverage for Growth for my own self
Yeah,
and how that
absolutely.
relates
Yeah,
to what we're
certainly.
talking
Yeah,
about?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so in the beginning of 2019, I launched Niche and Control. 2020, I started working with agencies. Warren, one of my first clients, went from 15,000 to 100,000 in 9 months. We reverse engineered what worked for him, and that became kind of like Leverage for Growth version 2.0. Every single year, we've been kind of like revising it. And in 2022, I was the self-employed person, right? I was a one-on-one coach. I was making 30,000 a month take home. And my wife comes up to me and she's like, "Why are you so miserable? You're making the most money that you've ever made, you know?" And I was like, I did it again. I did it all over again. I just created another job. What the heck am I doing? You know?
Yeah, yeah.
And so what I started to do was I started to apply Leverage for Growth to my own business. Before, I was a coach very similar to like a sports coach that doesn't actually do the sport, you know.
Sure.
And so I switched from a one-on-one to a group where I was doing one-to-many, right? And over the last 3 years, we've spent a lot of time working with a lot of types of clients. And I started getting to a place where I was needing an operational system above and beyond some of the systems that we had. I needed like a single system. And so it was a lot of like 6 months of the last year, 2025, was building this system, exactly what I'm talking about. But instead of 7 different systems, one system. It changes the game. And I had to make an identity shift over the last 3 weeks to lead towards the place where I made a very distinct difference between that self-employed quadrant and the business owner. And one of the things that I did was I started labeling the old version. And being like, that old version is dead now, and now this new version is arising, where I'm switching from the visionary builder, where I'm getting my hands dirty with a bunch of systems, and switching over to a steady operator, person who works within the business, and I'm empowering the team. And that whole switch, literally, I knew it was not a tactical thing. It's an identity thing. And so I literally spent all winter break focusing on who do I need to become? Who do I need to become? And in order for me to declare that yesterday, and I'm telling you right now, when you make that switch mentally, you make micro decisions differently than you normally would. Right? I haven't checked my email all morning, because I have someone that handles that, right? I haven't checked the system being built right now and being released in 2 weeks because I have somebody for that, right? And my value changes. This is something that I can't have anybody else do, being on a podcast talking with Wayne about shifting views. Now I'm stepping into a unique ability. And I think that there's probably another part of unpacking that mindset shift is really just understanding what is your unique ability. And if other things that you're doing right now were taken care of, where are you like best at? Like what can only you do? And I think defining that is a big, big piece of the puzzle for the mindset shift, the acceptance of the business being run. And maybe it's not perfect, but at least like it's 80% done by somebody else, and you're able to step into that visionary. So thanks for letting me share my bit.
No, it's really interesting. And I think that's a really prominent question to be able to ask someone, to say, okay, well, if you weren't in that position, if you weren't having to do what you're doing, what would you be doing? Like, where do you see yourself? Where do your sort of skills lie, if you like, what do you want to do? I suppose the challenge to that, I guess, a little bit for a lot of founders, particularly in the early stage of businesses, and agency world is a tough world. And I've been in that world, and I suppose a big side of that is prospecting, landing clients, pitching. There's a whole thing about generating revenue. And there's, so an argument would be, well, it's okay saying having systems and have people do stuff, but first I've got to be successful enough to be able to do that, right? I've got to be able to. So how do you apply it in that earlier stage, or or can you even apply it in that early stage? Does it rely on you already having an element of success before you can truly make that shift, if that makes sense?
Yeah, that's a very valid question. A lot of the strategies that I've talked about so far are based around businesses that are over 20,000 a month, because that one stage of business where you're at 20,000 or more is usually when you hire your first employee.
Yeah.
It's usually like that one spot. Going from 0 to 20,000 a month, typically that hustle culture is part of the game, but I highly suggest that you don't. You just realize it's a phase. And the way out of the phase is what's called a proof of concept. Okay. You have to have 5 paying clients for the service, generating good results where they'll give you a case study. That is like literally the game between 0 and 20,000 a month. For those types of people, I would highly, highly, highly suggest that you just become very specialized and niche focused. Okay. A very specific group of people solving a very specific painful problem that they have, and that aligns with your core competence. Okay.
Right.
As long as you can do that effectively in the way beginning, you're set up for success. It's when people think that they have to launch a full service marketing agency that targets small to medium sized businesses, 90% of agencies out there, and trying to be everything to everyone when you have one person. It's like, come on, dude. Like you got to literally just narrow the focus and be able to execute. And so that's what I would say for those people. And those people that do the niche and they do the specialization and it's a core competence, absolutely, you can work 40 hours a week, hit the proof of concept, not sacrifice your world in order for you to accomplish it.
Yeah. No, well, that's really interesting because in itself that requires an element of process, an element of systems thinking. Even if you're a new starter or a new founder, what am I good at? What am I able to achieve? Who's going to really benefit from that? Who's the value of that? What's the easiest and the most quickest way I can do that to add the most value? That minimum viable service. That all of those elements. I suppose there's and this might come back to the hustle culture thing or something maybe, but there's an element of kind of frivolous freedom almost sometimes, when people sort of start these businesses, particularly in the creative sectors, marketing, advertising, whatever, where they're just like, hey, let's just be creative and do campaigns for people and do cool stuff. And of course, the reality of what the business side of that is that just isn't going to work. You have to still have some form of structure and some form of like tangible output and tangible offer. So going back to what the work that you do, is there almost like a pre-seed almost to what you do? If you was to write a book on this and say, okay, what would be the prequel to like what I do now? Is there a structure that you could put in there for, that sort of scenario? Like if you was thinking about going into that world?
Yeah, totally. So,
by the way, I'm not asking you to write that now. I'm just generally curious.
Yeah, absolutely. So you might have, based around the audience, you might have people that are in the group, and then ones that are a little bit earlier. I think one of the most important things that I would have every lifestyle type of an entrepreneur ask themselves is like, what is the definition of success for you? Is it just living the lifestyle? Do you want to impact people, or do you just want to have money, right? If it's a shallow type of, and granted, there's nothing wrong with the people that do the lifestyle kind of thing, but it determines what you're going to do. Your end game in the agency determines a lot of different things. The cool thing is most end games are work in the business when you want to scale it to the moon, as far as you can go, or sell it sometime eventually. The way to accomplish any 3 of those is literally just what we talked about with the leverage for growth method. But the people that are in the way beginning and they're trying to figure out, is this actually something that I want to do? My suggestion is to follow a proof of concept stage. So what your end game, at least within this phase is the 5 paying clients for your service. They're getting good enough results so they give you a case study. That's like an end game, an outcome that you're going after. To get there, if you're starting from scratch, this is what I would suggest. I would start looking at any of your past background, any industries, any people that you used to work with, any types of titles of people that you know their problem and then you know some type of solution, right? If you're a freelancer and you've done it on the side for a long time and you're thinking about going into it, making it a real business, then use that kind of knowledge and that kind of hands-on work to determine what is the most valuable thing. If you don't really know, you can ask your current, existing, or past clients, what was the most valuable thing that happened during our time together? And that kind of gives you at least a foundation of running the next process. I am a process person, apparently. Yeah. So what I would suggest is that once you understand who you're talking to and kind of at least have like an idea of what you're trying to bring to the market, you can start reaching out to 5 people within that group of your target and just ask them for an informational interview. Give them some type of gift in exchange for their time, 15 to 30 minutes, and you just ask them some questions. You record it for your own personal use, and that research of kind of diving into what the problem is and getting more information. You do that with 5 people. It'll give you an understanding and kind of a way of using the feedback to make whatever your offer is or whatever your product or service a little bit more refined. You do that for another 5 people, taking that refined version, going through the 5 people, doing the same exact thing. And then you refine it one more time and do it the third time. So you're talking to 15 different people within that group. And at the end of it, you should have a more refined product or service that you could take to the market. And then you just give all 15 of them a discount on doing that service. And the first one that says yes, do it for free. I normally don't say this, but the caveat is that you do it for free for the first person. That'll give you a case study once you hit whatever that result is. That is the starting point of pretty much everything you'd ever need to take to the market, something that's brand new. And from there, you just start doing the case studies. So that's what I would suggest.
Yeah. No, excellent. That's really good advice. And again, you are leaning into process, but I love that. That's exactly because I think that's what's needed. Genuinely, I think, that actual structure. I hear all the time when I speak to many founders and businesses, and I hear all the time that, there's kind of like vision and like creativity in what people want to do and like the aspiration and the bubble, if you like. But rarely when you try to pin down like the specifics, so often they go, okay, so what is the next step? What is the actual thing? What are you going to do tomorrow? Like, what is the thing? Because that's not vision, that's action. Okay. That's an actual thing. And I sometimes think that kind of gets blurred in the lines get a bit blurred because we're so bought into, again, it might be hustle culture or influence or whatever, but it might be your own kind of aspiration of what you want your life or business to be. But either way, you're kind of caught in that kind of excitement. It's like being excited for Christmas or something, but not actually thinking about buying the gift, or like, there is the actual process of doing that, So I think that's really interesting. I think that's really valuable advice, especially because you're obviously working with scaled businesses and you're scaling them more, which is great. But it's really nice just to hear your perspective from the other side, that very early starting point. Just in the last part of this, what I really wanted to talk to you about was kind of this link between personal life, family life, being a human, I guess, living and being consumed by your business. And of course, a big problem that I guess you would call it a problem you solve is that you're trying to give people that life back, particularly founders who are doing that massive workload. They're immersed in their business. The brain is fried. And actually the actual living of their life and, being married or having children or whatever it is whatever their thing is, takes a back seat. So how do you separate that? How do you immediately obviously there's the work you do, the structure and the processes, but in your own head, how do you separate like not being consumed by your business?
It's a loaded question towards the end.
Yeah. Well, well, actually, just to reverse that slightly, just thinking about yourself. I mean, you just on your own story, you said, that you became aware that you was doing so much, but you wasn't happy.
Yeah.
You was so is it, do you need that spark? Does something need to happen, or is there a way you can make this happen?
Yeah. I think it's the difference between a push and a pull. If you
Yeah.
think about motivation or inspiration, motivation is typically like a push.
Yeah.
Like you experience something that really sucks and you feel miserable, and then you have to do something about it, right? And there's like a
Yeah.
push. The pull is that you have like a vision for something greater than where you are today, and that's pulling you towards what it is. If you really want like lasting motivation, you have to have the pull and make it more of an intention.
Right.
For my own self, I find that doing a time log, I don't do it like all the time, but whenever I feel as though it's like something's off or I'm like pulled in a lot of different directions or something, I start looking at the use of time. Because ultimately we are human, we get pulled in a lot of different directions, and sometimes those are unconscious habits that are starting to happen. One thing I started noticing was I was on LinkedIn a lot scrolling. Right, LinkedIn is like I've 16,000 agency founder like followers and connections there, so I'm on there all the time, and
Sure.
I started realizing I was doing that, and I was like, okay, so I started deleting the app on my phone. Right. And then I started, apparently I got like a thumbs up here.
Sorry, that's probably me touching. Okay,
good.
it's because I'm scrolling through my questions and it's
Yeah,
obviously in the laptop.
it's all
Anyway,
good.
but it is good.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah. And the use of time is a big piece of it. I think that anybody that feels as though they're busy but not productive, or
Yeah.
they're doing things they don't want to do, or whatever, just log your time. You do that, it starts giving you an awareness. And with awareness, you can have the opportunity to do something different, right?
Yeah.
If you're unaware, you just kind of go into a zone. And
Sure.
I think that for my own self, becoming very aware of fulfillment, energy, value to the company, those kinds of things really started putting me in a direction of, I knew that eventually I was going to be leading by example and using leverage for growth as a method for my own business, even though I'm a coach and a coaching model is a little bit different than an agency model, but the overall structure and method is exactly the same.
Right.
And once I started doing that, I realized that everything that I've been teaching my clients, I'm now going through, and it has way more to do with that identity shift and then being pulled towards something. I had a vision, and right before I started hiring my first person in 2022, that I was put on my heart that I was going to impact 1 million entrepreneurs. And then I was like, I can only serve 15 people as a one-on-one coach. Serve 1 million people, like, oh my gosh, like something has to change, right? And so that was a pull that pulled me through a lot of the changes that had to happen.
Yeah. Well, the reason I kind of asked that question is because I was leading towards this idea. You've talked about, if I've got this right, an order of priorities.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of a body, your
Yes.
spirituality, family, then business. And I was curious why that order, why it went from body, spirituality, family, then business. Why you kind of put those things together like that.
Yeah, a cool thing is that wasn't made by me. That was a Wake Up Warrior, which is a men's like entrepreneur men's group that's all based around handling the trifecta of chaos, which is being a husband, being a father, and owning a business, right?
Right.
And it's called the Core Four, which is body, being, balance, business. And the reason why it's in that order is if you've ever experienced like a health issue, you can't think about anything else, right? Like you get worried about it, it's uncertainty, and it kind of just messes up a lot of things. So you got to get your body right. When you get your body right, being is like your purpose, your spirituality, and being able to be connected to something a lot bigger than yourself allows you to have insights that you normally wouldn't do if it was just all ego driven, right?
Sure.
And when you have your body right and your being right, then you're able to provide to those that are closest to you. Balance is really based around relationship with your spouse or relationship with your kids. And if you don't have those, just, your friends and your network. And then business is really, funding the dream, right? And the reason why it's in that order, and in the mornings, I do a morning routine. So I work out, I drink a green smoothie, I have meditation, I journal, and then every once in a while, I don't do it every single day, but I'll write notes of appreciation, love, and honor to my wife and my kids. And what happens when I do that work is that when I get into business, and I start working, and I work less than 40 hours a week, but when I am working, I'm like on, like very extremely present, right?
Mm.
Because I have the other parts of my life taken care of, or there's certainty in it. And that order is actually what transformed me from being a person that just works all the time, right? 2018, I did what's called a burial ceremony, where I wrote down all the things that were holding me back, all the habits, the mindsets, the unpredictable or unproductive types of ways of thinking, or whatever was holding me back. And I buried it with in the sand in Oregon with my wife and my son watching. And that was like a declaration kind of moment where I started to follow the body, being, balance, and business. And it's one of the most beautiful things that I've ever learned from a mentor. And it really does help me to, when I'm on business, I'm on. And when I'm off, I do as much as I possibly can to make that boundary happen.
Yeah. No, that is it, and that actual visceral thing that you talk about there, the physical kind of burial ceremony, if you like, kind of sort of really recognizing. And I suppose some of this stuff comes from, you talked about kind of time stamping your days and spending some time to understand, what am I actually doing? If I look back, what have I actually done? I suppose that would be the answer to most of your questions immediately, because the obvious red flags would stand out. Like if I was to do it for me, I'm pretty sure that I would have endless amounts of doom scrolling, like lots of stuff on my phone that I shouldn't be on my phone, time doing things that, really is taking either far too long, or I'm spending too much time focused on, and they're not actually giving me any real value. And I guess it was leading to one of my final questions to you, which was, is it a case that sometimes you can recognize, you understand this stuff, and it's easy to give that advice externally but not recognize it internally? I'm asking this in a personal way because I do this all the time. So I will say to somebody, it's blatantly obvious, you should be like, clearly you need to be doing this, that's not going to work, blah, blah, blah. And you do that, but not doing that to myself or to my own business, and by default you're almost a hypocrite, because you're living the opposite of what you're explaining. Are we just refusing to accept it personally almost?
I think self-integrity is rare, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
So I think that whether you believe in God or the voice or higher self or whatever it is, something always provides an environment for you to both learn and give, right? And what I find is a lot of times clients that I work with are dealing with something very similar to what I'm dealing with. The advice that I give them that works is what I need to apply to myself. And I find that I rewatch the podcast guests appearances that I have many times, because I know that in the moment something is speaking through me, and I know that there's parts of it that are actually for me, and parts of it that are for the audience, and parts of it for clients, right? And I think that the most important thing you can do as a leader is take your own advice, have self-integrity. And even if you're giving advice and that might not be something that you're applying right away, just ask yourself, where does this fit within my own life or my own business? And what can I do, even if it's like a single step in the right direction, where it kind of closes that gap? Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to be externally, focused on giving great advice, but not actually doing it yourself, because ultimately you'll deal with the same problems that you're giving advice to solve if you don't actually do it. So.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And to your point, one of the reasons that I do the Shifting Views podcast is because I love to learn, and there's an element of self self-learning, gaining advice, mentorship, whatever, because the people that are coming on have done all of these things, or they have all of these ideas, or they have a new way of thinking, hence shifting views, and it's like, well, yes, it's for the audience, and I want the audience to do that. But if I want the audience to do that, I've got to be willing to do that myself, and I've got to challenge myself. Am I doing that? So there is an element of that. That's what's cool about having conversations and podcasts. That's what I like about it. So the fact that, and just like you, I look at the interviews back, not just in the editing process where I watch the podcast 1,000 times, but like just generally as entertainment. What am I gaining from that as a listener? And is that helping? Jesse, you've been really valuable with your time, so I don't want to keep you much longer because I know you've got things on. But I could speak to you for ages because like you trigger all sorts of sparks. And my questions that I had for you, I haven't really gone through because every time you've said something, it's triggered a different response, which is perfect. The nature of these things. But just in closing, I really as a takeaway for listeners, for an entrepreneur listening, to a founder, to somebody that's got a vision or whatever it is that they want to do, what could you give like one mindset shift or like one crucial thing that they need to be doing now to sort of pivot in the right direction to change what their future is?
Yeah. So I'd ask them to determine what your definition of success is. That's the first question, and define it not based around what you hear as success and who gives a crap about anybody else. Let's just say no one knows you're successful, but you know you're successful. What does that mean? Okay. That's like the first thing. The second thing I'd have you do is the time log. Okay. It's a mirror. It sucks. It's like pulling teeth, but it'll tell you a lot about yourself and kind of where you are today. Okay. And just log your time every half an hour for 7 days and then review it based around sleeping habits, morning routines. How often are you doom scrolling or whatever, and that just kind of sets you up to be able to make a change. The third thing I'd have you consider, and I know you just asked for one, but I kind of package it up in
one package, yeah.
One package of three. And the last one is just determine what stage of business you're in right now. Okay, are you in that proof of concept stage? Now that we've labeled it and we know that that's a phase within business, you don't have to worry about all the other things. Okay, you don't have to worry about what LinkedIn tells you you're missing out on or whatever, you can focus in your lane. Okay, the stage of business, if you are beyond the proof of concept stage and you're starting to hire people, that leverage for growth method, you can rewatch this podcast many times and get to understand kind of what stage, do you have the system? Do you have the offer? Just understanding what stage you're in allows you to kind of have like a laser focus. And the third, sorry for the ring. The third, like ending to that is just once you understand, what's your definition of success, what your use of time is right now, and being able to understand what stage of business you're in. If you're kind of like determining, do I make this business all about me, a centralized business model, self-employed, or am I trying to make something bigger that lives on beyond me, business owner? Make that decision as well. It'll make your life so much easier and clearer when you make these very specific decisions. And from there, you're going to have enough awareness and enough certainty to be able to take in marketing messages that we get hit with and going, that actually doesn't match my definition of success, or that actually is for a stage of business beyond me, right? That level of discernment is like the most important thing. And if I was to shift one view, is just to be the ability of running your personal race, your own race, as opposed to accepting all the crap that's out there as if it's a race that you have to join and be a part of and unconsciously accept.
Yeah, no, that's really, really great advice and very clear tips and a clear process, as we said, a process to follow, which is really, really helpful. Thank you for that. And I suppose I would add one thing to that, which would be don't be afraid to reach out and ask the question as well, because sometimes you can't see the wood for the trees. And, there is that self-reflection. You've given some really good tools for doing that. But sometimes it's nice to be able just to ask the question and come to somebody like yourself and sort of say, listen, here's what I'm trying to do. Here's what I've got so far. Am I even going in the right direction here? And there's nothing wrong with reaching out and asking, right? I mean, that's what's great about business is being able to learn and discover and ask the question.
Absolutely. I think anybody that is listening, and specifically, I work with people that are over the 20,000 a month in the agency world. But if you're before that and you're trying to figure out the proof of concept, just connect with me on LinkedIn. Jesse P Gilmore. Make sure you got the P in there. It'll make it so you find me. But a DM chat back and forth, I can help you be able to figure out what the next step is. For people that are over the 20,000, I can give you clarity within less than 15 minutes. I've actually gotten testimonials from people where I'm just like, this is what you need to focus on. They're like, this is the most valuable thing because it saves me, the last 4 months I've been trying to figure out what I need to do. That is free. It's just a discovery call, nicheincontrol.com/discovery if you want to jump on 15 minutes with me.
That's really great. Well, you beat me to it because I was going to ask you where people can find out, but you're seasoned pro, so I like that. So,
275 podcasts before.
So if you like what you hear or it resonates with some of the stuff that Jesse's been talking about, if you're a founder and entrepreneur, you probably, some of the things we've already talked about are probably triggering things in your brain because they trigger all of us. Please do reach out to Jesse on LinkedIn, Jesse P Gilmore. Or nicheincontrol.com and find out more. Discover, ask the question. But there's been some great tips in here. Jesse, thank you for all of the advice you've given. There's some great methodologies. I would advise people to go back and pause some bits or write them down. He's given some very clear steps there that you can immediately start looking at. And if you're really serious about kind of taking things forward and making the change or achieving that vision, you do have to implement some processes and some systems. And, that's what this is all about. Jesse, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this. This is so interesting, and good luck with what you're doing because I think the advice is brilliant. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Wayne, and we'll have to do it again sometime.
I'm sure we will. All the best. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you.
Bye-bye.